Morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today as part of our Dion Leadership webinar series. Today, we are talking about the state of talent and culture in 2025, and I have our founder and CEO, Steve Dion, with us today, who will also introduce our panelists.
Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for taking an hour out of your busy schedule to join us on our first 2025 Dion Leadership webinar. I'm always excited to kick off our webinar with a panel of clients, strategic HR folks that are in the trenches doing work to talk about what's happening, what happened last year, and to give you some ideas and tools for you to think about as you approach the year. So first off, I want to welcome our panelists. Today, we have Anika Parker, Brian Lieberman, and Deneen Whipke. Thanks, guys, for joining us.
Happy to be here.
So Anika leads HR for a retail chain, a grocery store chain out of the Northeast under the ShopRite brand names. Brian is the Chief HR Officer for Geisinger Health, who is in the middle of Pennsylvania, and Deneen Whipke is the VP of HR for Duxco Global, a manufacturing organization that has a global footprint. And they're going to each do an introduction and talk a little bit about kind of what's going on in their organization. But what I wanted to say up front is we kind of handpicked 3 different industries with the intention to see how they're similar or different from a labor market, talent, and culture perspective. So I'm going to take about 5 minutes or so to kind of get us in the space of talent and culture. And we talked as a little team here about us kind of how to get you guys in this mindset. So I'm going to debrief one particular study and some of the things that we are seeing in the clients that we work with. Then I'll turn it over to each of them to do an introduction about their businesses. And that'll take us maybe 15 more minutes. And then we'll have 30 minutes 30 to 40 minutes for proctored questions. So please use the chat feature. I'll be proctoring those. So any questions that you have as we interact today, please join in. We want to make this interactive, fun, and hopefully the best use of your time as possible. So with that, for those of you that don't know Dion Leadership, I just wanted to start by saying kind of what's our point of view in coming to the table with this. So we're a global leadership and organizational development consulting business founded on this idea that organizations are better when employees can start every day excited and end every day accomplished. So all the work that you can do around creating those conditions creates better workplaces, creates better societies. And we're out there trying to do a lot of thought leadership, winning awards, as you can see on the top of this screen here, and kind of leading into what's going on next. And that's part of why we have this webinar series. We do work in 4 main verticals. And so today we're kind of talk about each of these. When we talked about talent and culture, you'll notice we were positioning not all of HR. So just to level set, we're not going to be talking about compliance or other things particularly, but we wanted to talk about talent and culture because we really play in the coaching, leadership and management development, team development, and OD space. And all 3 of our panelists work with us. Just want to give that as a kind of background that we've had a relationship from a client perspective for a while now. And but they're going to be talking about all the different programs and systems and tools they have in their organization. And these are some of the other clients we work with as well. Some of them are on the call today. So hopefully if you're looking to kind of network with any of these companies, let me know. Happy to share that. And some of the points of view I'll have today are coming from our work with these kinds of organizations. So we tend to work with some larger organizations in a lot of different industries. So with that, as a quick introduction, I wanted to share, and every year I think we've done this panel 5 years in a row, and I'd like to track Gartner's HR trend study. So they do a study of 1,600 top HR people globally to talk about what they're doing and analyze that, and they do a top 5 report. So in this year's top 5 report, if you haven't seen it yet, their number one item that they say is important from an HR perspective is leadership and management development. And particularly, they're saying this is coming from that 79% of CEOs say that this is a year for growth and transformation. So kind of post-pandemic, it's time to lean into growth. And as such, these 5 trends are part of why that is. And why it's important is the report says that 75% of the HR executives believe that managers are overwhelmed with their scope increasing and their responsibilities. And 70% of them also believe that the managers aren't equipped to handle this, particularly at the mid-level in an organization. 76% believe that their L&D programs aren't working as they want them to work, and 71% say they're not effective at developing mid-level leaders. So leadership development is a challenge for a lot of organizations, which, since that is a lot of what we do, that's been a big growth area for us in these last couple of years is management leadership programs. So I wanted to share these 5 trends, by the way, and then when we do the introductions, we'll see which of these are relevant to these 3 organizations, and they may all be and they may not be, but just wanted to give you kind of a general sense of where this is at. The second item that they said CHROs are focusing on is organizational culture. And that from the standpoint of them saying that managers are not enforcing desired vision of culture in the organization. Not that they don't have a culture or they don't know what it is, but it's not being deployed across the organization. That they feel that nobody's really accountable in making culture happen at the manager level. It's an HR task, so it's not happening. And that for organizations that do this well, that create culture embeddedness, they call it, that leads to 35% increase in performance, 63 in engagement, and 25% increase in intention to stay. So they're saying culture is important, but it's not cascading through the management ranks. Third is strategic workforce planning. That they're saying that most organizations are just doing headcount planning. And by strategic workforce planning, they mean 2+ years out. And that only about 15% of organizations are practicing looking at their capabilities and what they need more than 2 years out. And it's a focus area for them. Fourth is change management. This from the standpoint of saying that basically managers are change fatigued, that there's so much change going on in organizations that becomes a real challenge and they don't know how to manage that. And that leads to that 44% of the turnover or intent to not stay is because people just feel change fatigued. And then the last one is HR technology. Particularly, this isn't AI per se, but that 55% of technology solutions are not meeting business needs. They say when technology has been implemented, it's only given marginal improvements of efficiency, and it's not been as transformational as they want. And it seems to be an item on the list all the time. Wanted to share last year's study, because over the last 5 years, I've tracked this. Leadership and management development's been #1 for a couple years. It was 2 or 3 before. Org culture is similar. Technology was 3rd last year, and that dropped to 5. Change was there, and then last year was around career like internal mobility. So this is kind of the global trend of what we're seeing. What I've seen in organizations, and then I'm going to turn this over to our team to do a panel, is that we're seeing that the labor market's shifting, that there's less open jobs, it's more of a buyer's market. It's good to be able to find good talent, but it also puts pressure on organizations to keep people and say, well, how do I get promoted within since I don't have as many jobs open in my organizations. We're also seeing that a lot of companies are wanting to merge and grow in all industries, and that really changes the focus when somebody's acquiring another company. And I know we will speak to that a little bit today. It puts pressure on what HR does and what management should do, and that doesn't seem to be stopping. The Gartner study showed this, but we see this regularly as managers continuing to report burnout. And so therefore, all the issues of what they need to do that we just talked about aren't happening, and they're either staying and not engaged or they're leaving. We're talking more about Gen X's moving up in the ranks. So it's their first management job. They're becoming supervisors. Like that cultural element is changing in the organizations that we work with. And there is a kind of, we think, forever changed employee expectation of work now, and that hybrid work continues to create kind of an under-engaged employee. Whether it's, we read a lot about transactional work, but it might not even be just that the work is transactional, but that not being in all the time, they're not as engaged in the organization. And I know we're going to talk about that today, is because we chatted about that in our prep. And then the last one here is, I don't think we should lose sight of AI. It's making more inroads, and we're seeing organizations talking more about how we use HI within the manager ranks and what it's going to do for the way our culture is and works. So that's our side of it. I'm looking forward to spending the next 50 minutes with our panel to talk and see where they are at. And I guess I'd like to start with Anika to give a little bit of a background of your organization, what you're seeing, and we're going to spend 3 to 5 minutes for each of you to do a quick intro, and then we'll move into some questions. And again, let me remind you before we start, feel free to kind of load up the chat with any questions or burning issues you have, and I will make sure we weave those into the conversation.
Great.
Take
Good
it away,
morning,
Anika.
everyone. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Anika Parker, and I am the Director of Human Resources for Zally Family Markets. Zally Family Markets is a 51-year-old family-owned business operating under the ShopRite banner. We own 11 stores, 10 of which are in southern New Jersey and one in Philadelphia. We are a business that operates with unions. We have 2 unions in each store and some non-union team members as well. I'm happy to be here today.
And how many employees totally?
2,500.
Great. Thanks, Anika. And Deneen?
Hey there, I am Deneen Whipke. I'm the head of HR for Dexco Global. We are a global organization. We have about 6,000 employees worldwide. We've got about 120 locations. We are spread across about 24 countries at this point. We grow through acquisition very dramatically. I think we've had 37 acquisitions in the last 7 years. I've been in the company 7 years. We manufacture and distribute running gear. So think pretty much anything that's like kind of hitch and back behind a car. We don't do automotive. So it would be, think about like boat trailers, RVs, campers. We had a very high boom in 2020 when everybody thought that they could quit their jobs and jump into an RV and live out of an RV for a little while during COVID. So there was a big spike in business and big boom across the world. And then everything kind of started to slow down a little bit after that. So we had a big bump, and then the market started to slow down a little bit from there. But that's the business that we do. So kind of all the metal componentry that goes underneath those RVs, campers, RVs, specialty trailers, axles, all the things that are under there, we manufacture and distribute those around the world. We have 2 major divisions. One is headquartered in Indiana, and then the other is headquartered in Germany and spreads across the rest of the world. Brian, I think Steve's on mute, but Brian, go on ahead.
Oh, goodness. Thanks, Brian. Can you go next?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here. Brian Lieberman from Geisinger Health. Geisinger Health is a integrated delivery system, and what that means is we deliver healthcare to people in hospitals and clinics. We insure people through our health insurance plan. We teach through our School of Medicine, School of Nursing, and other teaching programs, and we research. So that we have all components of this within our healthcare system. We are in Pennsylvania, really kind of in the central and northeastern part of the state is where we're located, and serve over 1 million people, or actually over 3 million people, and we have 26,000 employees.
Well, thanks again, all of you, for taking your time and expertise today and joining us. As you can see, we have 3 very different organizations. So let's dig into what's going on in your world, and let's start with talking about what's on top of mind of your senior team regarding talent and culture, because obviously the HR function is not doing this alone. You're supporting an organization's strategic objectives. So where are they at with talent and culture? Deneen, what's going on in your organization?
Yeah, so I think, talent and culture, I think in our organization, we think of those as very linked together. From a talent perspective, our organization, our senior leadership team is incredibly committed to talent. It's one of the best things about, like, I can't even imagine working for a company that wasn't fully committed to it. My team is amazing. It's awesome, Steve. You know this. Everybody's constantly asking. There's always a list of more things to do around talent and development and all the things talent related. And so for us, a lot of it is related to leadership and talent in our leadership roles. So around our branch managers and plant managers. And a lot of that is because of how it relates to the culture across the organization. And I think because those two things are so closely linked, that's really important for us, because those individuals, the leaders that are around the organization, are really the ones that are steering performance and the culture across the organization. We have so many locations. Those leaders and their ability in terms of performance and in terms of the way they cascade information and the way they carry the culture are really the ones that are kind of carrying the message of Dexco across the organization. So from our perspective, I think we're highly focused on that and trying to make sure that we're carrying that message a bit stronger in 2025. We've done so many acquisitions over the last several years that we've done a great job of integrating systems and processes and making sure our finance systems are gone really well and making sure we're doing certain technical things the same way. But from a cultural perspective, we haven't necessarily integrated the culture that way. And so across 2025, I think that's a huge focus for us, making sure that we've integrated that just as well as we've integrated the other piece. So I think that's a big piece for us, is that leadership development in how it relates to the culture part.
Great. And I know as we'll get into the how you're going to do that, we'll get into that as well. But Brian and Anika, I'd love you to kind of connect on this as well. What's going on from your senior management team's perspective on talent culture?
Sure. So,
Brian?
Geisinger is a 110-year-old company. Proud of that. But in 2024, we decided that we needed to partner with another healthcare system, and we were acquired by Kaiser Permanente. And so from a talent and culture perspective, being independent for 110 years and then deciding to become part of a larger healthcare system has a big impact on your talent and culture. And actually, there's a new company that was formed called Horizon Health, and we're a member of that. And we feel that we're going to be able to impact more broadly value for patients and value for members on the insurance side in the way that healthcare is delivered. But as you may imagine, if there's a range of emotions that comes across with that. And so brought with us a new CEO. He's been on board for about 9 months. That's been a positive thing. But with change, that range of emotions exists. You have people very excited about the change. You have some people who are fearful about the change. And then you have this whole group of folks who are in the middle on a wait and see. And so that is probably one of the biggest things that is a focus for us in 2025 from a talent and culture perspective is, really kind of playing out that vision and making sure that everybody knows what that means. And I'll talk more about that later.
Yes, for Zally's, we are in a growth mode. So for us, we're highly focused on making sure that we have appropriate talent in the right positions to be able to support the growth that we intend to do. Additionally, the supermarket business historically has run, kind of a harsh way. It's a very much, do as I say type of culture overall in supermarkets. So, as we all know today, the most important thing and most of our time is spent on people issues. And so growing the leadership so that they understand how to deal with those people issues and to be able to retain the team members that we have, that they're happy and engaged, and refocusing. We're very good at selling food and selling products, but refocusing the leadership teams to be able to deal with some of the delicate issues that happen every day is a big focus of ours as well.
Right. So some very different needs right now from each of you is what I'm really hearing. But all of which be interested to see is the tools you put in place. Does the same tool solve multiple problems? Before we get into some of the tools, because I see some of the questions coming in more about the how-to, I wanted to kind of stay at the broader level first. Let's talk a little bit about kind of what you're hearing about from your employees. So what are you experiencing regarding employees? I guess, my earlier comments, I said that, people wanting meaningful work and feeling that, it's transactional and employees are not engaged. Are you seeing that in your organizations, Brian?
Yeah, it shows up in a few different ways. And so I guess one of the benefits of like literally curing cancer and doing things like that is that everybody who joins healthcare is very purpose driven. And so the work is extremely meaningful. But that doesn't mean that we can just kind of like sit back and just, let that drive everything. And, some of the challenges that come up, they just come up in various different ways, whether you measure it in an engagement survey or you're just, hearing feedback in different settings. The vision is important. Having clear goals is important. And then kind of like stepping back and letting people do what they do. And if you don't step back and let people do what they do, that's where we kind of run into issues with the meaningful work. So it's much different than what I just heard from Anika in terms of her culture and where we get into that mode of maybe saying we're going to centralize this and this is going to be how everybody's going to do something. We certainly do centralize a lot of things because there's big benefits to that, but folks want autonomy within how they're going to practice healthcare and deliver healthcare and just do their job and set a clear vision and give me clear goals. Make sure that it's simple. That's something that's really helpful. I think another thing is people want you to make decisions quickly. And the longer that it takes to make decisions, the greater impact that has on somebody, being able to assess if the work that they're doing is meaningful or not. And then lastly, communicating. You're never going to get accused of, communicating enough, but people really, they need to be informed on the matters that directly impact them the most. We do tons of communication, but sometimes it's too much. And I think those are like the three factors that go into meaningful work, at least within the talent culture that I'm in within Geisinger.
Thank you. Great thoughts on that.
Yeah,
Another thought, Denise?
Yeah, so from the engagement perspective, we just did our global engagement survey, and it was the first time since I've been here that we've gone backwards, which was really, it's unfortunate. It's something you never want to see in an organization. So on an HR person, when you get the results back, you're waiting for the results to come out and you're dying to open the results, and the last thing you want to see is that it went backwards. We had a sneaking suspicion that it would because of our the market has gone down in our industry. It's gone down. And so we've had to do some consolidations and headcount reductions. And so it wasn't necessarily a big surprise. We've done a lot to try to really over communicate with our employees about what's going on in the market and make sure we're communicating and trying to find the right balance of like really communicating what's going on in the market, but at the same time, not kind of overwhelming people with like the negative news of what's going on in the market. And then also sharing what the future vision is to say, we're making these decisions so that we'll be stronger in the future is something that we're trying to make sure that we're finding the right balance in communicating, hey, here's why the headcount reductions are happening, and it's happening so that we will be a stronger company in the future. And companies that don't make these decisions and don't do adjustments as necessary along the way are setting themselves up to be in a worse position down the road. And so trying to make sure we find that balance with like the short-term message, but also communicating the long-term message, I think is incredibly important. And then, also looking at our engagement results, like if we look at the aggregate number, it went down. But then when we dig into the individual results, like I mentioned, we have 120 locations. Looking across the locations, it goes back to that leadership piece. We have about if I look at it, 80% of our disengaged employees came from about 5 of our locations. So we have some locations that are incredibly disengaged. And so you look at the leaders in that location and say, what's going on there? And it gives us a spot to look in. And I was just reading something over the weekend that had a really interesting, I don't know if it was a quote or some sort of fable, but it was basically saying, you know, if a flower keeps dying in the garden, at some point you stop blaming the flower and you start looking at the soil. And so that's something that we start saying, okay, we keep, you know, focusing on like the people and growing the talent and trying to adjust like the employees that are in there and throwing more talent at, or more training at them. Okay, like, but it like, let's look at the leadership. Let's make sure that we're doing something different with either the leader or how we're communicating or something that's going on in that location. And maybe it's not the leader, maybe it's a system, maybe it's, you know, a process that's like very frustrating that's there. But like really being able to look at the data and really analyze the situation, I think is incredibly important, and not assuming that there's a one size fits all to anything that's going on in the business, and thinking that there's some blanket solution to a problem, I think is incredibly important.
Well, I think you touch on something that's important to highlight here too, that in terms of where we are in talent culture and the changing landscape, it is really important to assess your employees directly and not just kind of hear it through a single person's viewpoint. Who did I bump into today? And that's how I'm judging what this looks like. I know we're in the middle of completing two global employee engagement surveys for two of our clients. And are seeing the same thing you're seeing. Is typically what happens is once you see the segregated data by either location or function, you start to realize that the culture is driven from the leaders of those locations, and then you can target doing something different. That just like we talked about earlier in the Gartner study, that you know, organizational culture comes through managers showing the culture every day. It's not the HR newsletter or, you know, corporate communications or the town hall the CEO does once a quarter that's going to do that. It's in the everyday interaction. So I think that's a good point as we get into the what might I want to consider doing for our audience today. That's, I think, a great example.
Yeah, and one of the things, sorry to jump back in here, Steve, but like one of the things we were talking about in our calls is like some of our locations have kind of the propensity to say, like, use the market as an excuse. Well, we had to do headcount reduction, so I'm not surprised our engagement score went down. And like, well, the market's been really challenging. Like, well, we've been working really hard and doing a lot of overtime, and so therefore we expect that turnover will be high or the engagement will be low or our morale will be down. But we have, like, all of our locations were going through similar things, and in some of the locations they grabbed arms together, and because of the way they handled it with their leader and in the way that they went through it together, their engagement actually went up. So we had just as many, actually more locations where their engagement went up, and they still had those really difficult system implementations and the layoffs and the short time work and all those things that the other locations went through, and they went up. And so, you know, using those things as kind of a scapegoat for other issues is not a way to be able to solve something.
Great. Anika, do you want to kind of weigh in on your employees, and then we'll kind of move into, if you could talk then about kind of all that things, then what are the particular HR programs, whether it's recruitment, L&D, culture, that you're working on?
Yeah, sure. So we have kind of a different story in our business. One of the pieces of our mission statement is to allow people to help people to eat well and be happy. And that is top of mind, I see, when I'm in the stores, on all the team members' minds. And because we are a public facing organization where the team members are constantly all day interacting with the public, they can see the results of their efforts right away. So I think that, you know, overall we have a pretty engaged workforce. As I have gone through and looked at engagement survey results and talked to team members, the one area that we struggle with a little bit is actually in the department manager level, because we have very strong store director level, we have engaged team members, but sometimes the department manager level, which is like a frontline supervisor, they don't always feel heard, and they're super committed to the organization and they have great ideas, but they don't always feel that their ideas are heard by, store director level team members. So one of the things that I've been working on is to really create areas where they can have their ideas heard, and not just heard, but implemented where it works within the business. To move on to the area of HR that I'm most focused on this year, that's where you wanted me to go next, right, Steve?
Yeah, please. Yes.
Okay. So the areas that I'm most focused on this year is the recruiting and development of high performing team members. So we are in growth mode, and we need team members in order to execute some of this growth. So being able to recruit not just cashiers and stock people, but people in more highly skilled positions like bakers, meat cutters, those sort of things is what I'm really focused on. When I took a look at just some quick data for our butchers, which is a skilled position, you have to go through a whole journeyman program for that. It takes about 2 years to be certified for a butcher. We have only 9 team members who are under 50 years old in those positions. And most of our team members are closer to 60, between 60 and 70 years old. So we have team members who've been in those roles for 25, 30 years, but we don't have anybody to replace them when they eventually decide to retire. So right now I'm working on a program that's close to completion, close to ready to be rolled out, that will look at 2 things. Number one, internally, do we have other team members that might be interested in some of those skilled roles? I mean, we employ people who are as young as 16. So some of those people are deciding what they want to do with their life, right? And so looking to see if there's interest within our business for people that we can train, because we will train people how to be butchers. We will train people how to be bakers and all of the specialty positions so they can grow their careers here. Additionally, we are looking to engage with community groups and schools to really discover some talent that we can bring in to the business that would be willing to train. I mean, college is not for everyone, right? So we're looking at those folks who don't want to go to college or are not interested in college right now, or maybe can't go to college, to see that they still can contribute and have a very fulfilling career within the grocery business. So that is a main focus for me this year, is to really roll out. This is not a short-term program. This is a long-term program to be able to build our bench strength over the years and ensure that we have a continuous pipeline for some of these highly skilled positions.
Well, and what you're saying, Anika, too, connects to that Gardner study of strategic workforce planning. I mean, just make the connection for everybody on the audience, like whatever your jobs are, whether it's a journeyman butcher or, physician leader, or, a physician or, an auto mechanic, whatever your business is, like being able to think about what do we need over the next few years and how do I get that? And what's the age of that workforce, and taking time to do that, looking a couple years out and then building that strategy, because it takes a few years to get that pipeline going. And it sounds like the other thing I'm hearing you say is kind of creating a employment brand and a value proposition for why you would want to stay here, which gets also to that, long-term workforce engagement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I'd like kind of each person to kind of weigh in on kind of their main area of focus, and then I'm going to specifically get to a couple of the questions that were asked to kind of narrow in on a specific item or two. So Brian, what's your kind of main focus area?
Yeah, we have a few things, and I would say I'm going to start with the strategic workforce planning because Anika just left us there. We have a different reason why we do strategic workforce planning, and there are shortages in nursing. We have a problem, a good problem to have, but still a problem. We don't have enough access for people, and so if people want to get in to be seen for whatever their medical appointment is, they're not getting in fast enough or soon enough. And so we need to recruit more physicians and advanced practitioners. And so we look out at strategic workforce plans at a 3-year basis. And we do factor in like what is natural turnover and what is retirement, but our why is less about development in these two examples that I'm giving, and it's more about, well, what's the need of the business and how are we going to fulfill the demand, the access. So that's one of the things that we do. Employee development and including manager and physician development is a huge aspect of what we're doing. We do hit a lot of managers in our development programs. We don't hit enough employees, and so we are our learning management system is really compliance based right now, and we are upgrading our learning management system, and we're going to curate additional content that is not just compliance based that you can really delve into on your own, and you can. Some things may take you a minute to do, some things may take you a half hour to do, but that's one of the ways that we're going to focus on our employees. And then I mentioned the whole 110-year-old company, and so we have done listening circles. That's what we called them in the fourth quarter of the last calendar year, to really talk to our employees at all different levels and in all different type of roles to ask about our strategic focus and what we've been focused on and where we're heading in 2025 and get their feedback. And we've used that feedback to really kind of refine what our focus is, what our vision is, and really kind of thinking about using simpler, more clear words that can resonate with everybody. And it doesn't take a dictionary to kind of decipher, well, what exactly are we after there? And hopefully that drives greater performance.
Good insight. There could be a lot of aspirational, cheeky, gobbledygook statements for people like, what does it mean to be here, and what's in it for me, and how do I connect to this organization if I want to choose to stay here? So that's a great insight. And you, Deneen?
Yeah, Steve, was your question specific just about recruiting and training?
Was this which initiative out of the whole like HR space of L&D, recruiting, training, talent that you're most focused on this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think
I know it's hard to get one because
yeah,
more initiatives
yeah.
than you can do.
I don't know how to narrow it down. I think really the leadership development piece is huge for us. We've had so much changeover in leadership, and we did a really huge acquisition last year of the distribution side of the business. So that piece of it, I think, is a big deal. And then in really like the cultural integration part of a lot of the tag-ons that we've done across the business, and making sure that we're kind of finishing up what we've done with integrating our HR processes across the business, and making sure that we're doing that in a much more effective way is really where we're focused on from the HR perspective. At this point, I think we've done a lot of things where people are checking the box. Like, so we have a lot of really great programs in place. Like there was some questions about like different talent development programs that we have. Like we've got through Dion, we've actually created some really great high potential, high performance development programs that we have for top leaders, for emerging and current leaders that we have around the business. We've got a supervisor skills development program that we already have that's in place. We've got certain online programs that we already have that are like online trainer-led programs that support our success standards, which are our competencies. We've already got a Dexco University, which is our online portal for our CBTs. Like we've got a lot of things that are out there, but we want to make them more alive. And then we also really want to like connect them like and try to use them in more of a cultural way. So at this point, a lot of our things are kind of like a bunch of binders on a shelf, and we want to really connect them more holistically. And then, if we think about that more symbolically, like we want all of the companies of Dexco to really connect together as well. So it's kind of like the year that we're going to be trying to bring things together and bring together our programs, and also like really bring together the company under one so that we feel more connected.
Well, I know I can speak to, I know the work that we do with you and with kind of each of your organizations and other organizations, that the leadership development programs are both to build, skills for that leader to be more effective at their job and be a pipeline. But also it's to inform culture, putting enough people through the programs. And a lot of the conversation we have is this drives the way in which we work because we're teaching leaders how to behave for everybody else and doing it in groups in the organization with enough people creates this tipping point that says this is what we mean by a high sense of urgency or balancing respect with clarity and alignment and accountability and what does feedback mean here. And if you teach enough people the same way, it becomes a culture tipping point. And one of the things in the Gartner study I didn't share, kind of one level deeper in the L&D program piece, was them saying the need for having employees to have a social network within their leadership development program so that they're applying the work that went from a classroom into the work environment because they're building connections and, in the programs, being able to be long enough and be in cohorts that you can actually kind of see each other do this and support that to create this kind of tipping point in an organization. Let me turn to a couple of the questions. So the one that may be closest to this discussion was, what are your organizations doing in terms of succession planning? I mean, I think we already talked a little bit about the strategic workforce planning. Anything else you'd comment about, particularly related to succession planning?
At Dexco, we have a really structured process that we go through twice a year. We call it our P3. It's our people planning process. The way we think about it really is just like you plan a budget. Everybody goes through their budget planning process and plans for materials and finances and everything. We plan for our people. So we go through a process where we kind of do an inventory of our talent. And then we talk about what we think they could do. So we do the career path planning exercise, and then we also talk about the succession for what kind of talent we have available and where we would have risk and what we would do to fill those roles. And then I also saw a question about do we have some sort of mechanism to be able to ask people about what their interests are? And we do that through our quarterly performance check-ins. There's one of our quarterly, we change the theme of each quarterly performance check-in where we have a couple questions that are free text questions, and we'll ask during one of the quarters, like, what are your career interests? What is something that you'd like to do at some point? And what do you think you need to do to get there, so that they are prompted to think about what their skill gaps are and how they need to do it. And then they have a conversation with their manager so that their manager is informed and they can talk through together about what they should be doing. And then there's a growth module that we have in our performance management system so that they can develop a growth plan together on building that succession plan.
We do very similar things from a succession planning standpoint. I would say we're most formal if we think about our CEO and then 2 layers down. And that helps inform, not only are we protected, but who are we going to develop throughout the organization, and identifying, different ways to develop people through that. And so there's obviously a lot more I could say, but that's one way that we do it very formally within the organization. And we collect data, I would say semi-formal in terms of people's career interests. We could probably get better at that, like Deneen just described, but there's 2 examples of things that come to mind, and we're not doing this universally for all 26,000 employees here, but we use Workday as our HR technology. We've created a individual development plan within Workday. And I mean, that's a positive thing. Sometimes in HR, you hear development plan and you think it's because you're in trouble for something. But, what are people focused on? What are their goals? And that comes up when you do that. And we also utilize a tool called a stay interview. And so instead of an exit interview when you're leaving too late, we just ask people 3 to 5 questions about, really why do they stay here? What really motivates them? And they're basic questions, but then things about career aspirations or what they like or don't like comes up in that conversation. It really gives the leader and the employee an opportunity to hone in on things and just work on greater improvement.
Brian, I have to ask you a question. Do you guys do that in like a formal process through the Workday system, like annually or something? Is it like a formal thing that's documented?
The stay interview, no.
No.
No. It actually does get documented, but we're not so prescriptive that it must be done annually.
Okay.
And it's really a conversation that occurs. and
Okay.
there isn't really technology with it. We want the face-to-face aspect, but we guide our leaders with like, here's some suggestion questions to ask.
Is that an
Okay.
HR business partner driving that, or their leaders?
The HR business partner and our OD team are driving the kind of concept and the framework of, here's what you should do and why. And our recruitment team has been involved in that as well, because our best way to solve our recruitment issues are to keep our people. But no, it's between the manager and the employee. So we developed the guide, but we have the manager and the employee have those conversations.
We've talked about adding those at some point, and we haven't done it yet. Is it something that you guys you do it annually,
We
or
we do it more frequently, and so like we use it most within our nursing division, but we have like over 5,000 RNs within our organization, so that's huge. But that's like a huge way of how we provide the care, and it has really helped. I mean, our retention of our nurses is very strong. It's around 92%. We want it to be even stronger, but that is best in class, and I would say that's one of the success stories there.
I think that could be a topic for a whole own webinar of how do you proactively retain talent, and this would be one of the core elements of just asking people and signaling that you want them here is huge. The other connection point I'd make with what you said, Brian, too, about succession planning is, in addition to the fact that you do those two levels, I have to say to commend you that you've also then, I know in working with us, immediately then turned to, how do I develop this person? And we worked with you for some coaching assignments to say, let's be proactive in getting somebody ready to assume a next position by giving them a leadership coach, by assessing kind of the people around them and their followership, and not just having a plan and being their next, but actually doing something with a few of those people. And I think that's a really important element to making sure your succession plan is successful, not just something on a page. The other open question was on training and development. What does it look like? Is there one leader and champion that across your organizations? What are your key focus areas that are making a big impact? I know we've talked a little bit about training and development. Deneen, you did. Anika, you want to maybe jump in on this one? Kind of what does your training and development programs look like?
Yeah, sure. So we do, as far as who leads that initiative, we do have a training function. We have a training coordinator who's a manager level employee who works to do skills-based training, cashier training, deli training, that sort of thing. We also use a company called Exonify that is an e-learning that gives e-learning in bite-sized pieces so that we can, train our employees on both skills-based compliance training as well as some lightweight, I would say, management training. And then we have put into place. Do you want me to talk about our Lead Well program?
Sure, if you'd like to. Yeah, sure. I know it's an important part of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I was charged with when I came into the organization was to really kind of assess all of our programs and development programs and see where the gaps were. And the one thing that was glaring to me is we did a really pretty good job at developing our upper leaders, and we did a great job of bringing people into the organization and making sure that they had the skills necessary to do their jobs effectively. Where the gap is within our department manager level. People got promoted into these positions because they were very good at the technical pieces of their job, but we never really gave them the tools necessary to lead people within those jobs. So we have a group of very dedicated, technically sound folks who flounder somewhat on the people side. So I partnered with Dion and really did a deep dive with them as far as some listening sessions with our director level and above, as well as some focus groups directly with our department managers to find out what are the challenges that they're facing. Because I didn't want to just implement a generic training session that people would walk away feeling that they were taught at instead of engaged with. And I wanted to make sure that whatever we offered, people walked away feeling really good and that they got a few tools in their toolbox that they can use on a daily basis. So through this process, we developed a program called Lead Well. LEAD stands for Learn, Explore, Apply, and Develop. And we started with this department manager group. So we've so far put over 100 of our department managers through the program through 2024. And this is a 2-day program that teaches them, gives them skills that they need and how to go from being a coworker to a leader, how to coach their team members, how to provide feedback and also how to receive feedback, and we spend a fair amount of time on how to deal with stress, because again, in our stores, we're dealing with the public, and that is a wild card on how that's going to go on any given moment, as well as the team members. And we frame all that with the DISC assessment, which has been really helpful to understand your how you show up at work and how your other team members and coworkers show up at work, and how we can better communicate with each other by learning each other's styles. And this has been pretty wildly successful. At the end of each session, we have feedback that we ask, because we want to make sure that what we think we're doing is really hitting the mark. And then we've made adjustments along the way, and we've tweaked it as we go along. One of the things that we've added is that the second day, I actually go into every session and I sit with the department managers and I tell them some things I want them to know about human resources, and when to come to HR and when to handle it yourself, and some policy issues. And then I answer their questions and really just use it as a few minutes to help them work through some things and to give them some more knowledge that they can use in their everyday life. The overwhelming feedback from this program was that the team members said in every class that they wish that their managers, their directors could go through something similar. When I brought that to our president and the owner, they gave it the blessing, and we developed a second level called Lead Well 2, which is all of the directors levels have gone through. That's a 4-day program, and we've gone through 2 of the days so far. We have 2 more coming up in January and February. In addition to that, I developed one with Dion for the HR group. Our HRs in our store are not quite HR managers. They're partially the admin to the store director, and they also do HR. So to help them to develop some skills, focusing on influencing without authority, as well as also the DISC profile. And the last portion of that is Lead Well Executive. That'll be a program that we do in February that will give the assessments to the executive, which is the DISC, as well as emotional intelligence, as well as to give them an overview of what we've been spending our time doing for the last year and a half, and what we intend to do in the future. So this program has done a couple of things. Number one, it's given our team members tools that they need. It's also developed a common language with the DISC profile, so that we're all speaking the same language as we interact with each other, and it helps us to form partnerships amongst the department managers at different stores, so that they have people that they can rely on, because I didn't want this to be a program that kind of dies on the vine. I want it to be a living organism, if you will, of development moving forward.
Well, that's a great example of how you put those together at each level and the audiences, and realizing that even 1 or 2 days can make a really big impact for the organization, especially when you're putting lots of people through it.
Yeah.
Well, in our last couple of minutes, I wanted to get 1 or 2 more focus areas, if you don't mind. So one other question was about are there any resources that you're using for employee change fatigue? So how do you manage where employees say I'm burnt out, or dealing with kind of overwhelmingness or change fatigue? Got any 1 minute idea on that one, or?
I'll look to you guys on this one.
We have invested in hiring a chief well-being officer who probably started in our organization maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. She's a physician. There's science behind well-being, and she would do a much better job than I'm about to do here. But
Yeah, it's a whole
there's
other
just
webinar too, right?
yeah, there's a number of different resources that we provide through that group, and I would say it's very complementary to HR. Something that it used to be, well, what benefits do you have through your employee assistance program and things like that are now built out, and she serves our people. So burnout is reducing within our organization, but it's a constant, it's a constant thing.
Great. Yeah, I know that. We can't dig too deep into that. So, and in our last 1 or 2 minutes before I do kind of our close here, I probably get to one more question. What low-cost initiatives and reward examples that you could share to encourage the behaviors that drive your company's positive culture?
I can jump in on that. We are a low tech company, so I had to look at what can we do that doesn't cost a lot of money, that is not highly technical, that will get team members engaged. So I created a program called High Five. High Five once a week. One week every month, we put a box out in our break rooms, and we have some little sheets that team members can thank each other for things that they feel that they do really well, that align with our values of do what's right, respect others, and do your best. And the team member, it's a duplicate form. The team member can give, the nominating team member can give the other team member the form. We put the other copy in a box. And then at the end of the month, each store draws one name out of that box, and that person wins a $100 gift card. Then we take all of the slips and we post them on a board so that everybody can read what the team members have said about each other. It's really a team member driven event. It doesn't have really any manager intervention except for pulling the card at the end of the month. And the first month in one of the stores, we had 22 people participate in that same store. 3 months later, they've had 90 people participate. So it's just taken on a life of its own.
Great example. Well, we are about end of time. There were a couple more questions we didn't get to. If anybody wants to chat offline after this, happy to just, well, I'll let you know. We're going to send out an email to you with the recording, the PowerPoint, and the Gartner study after this for those of you that have attended, and those who signed up that wanted to watch the replay later. We'll get it to you there. I wanted to thank our panelists. Thank you again, you guys, for spending an hour with us. I know you had to prep for this, and hopefully you found it intellectually interesting to think about what's going on in your business and having to articulate it. I'm putting on the screen here as well what our next webinar is and some other resources. Our next webinar, we do these every other month. For those of you that want to talk about leadership development deeper, experiential learning is really the topic. And we're going to talk about using equine assisted learning, so courses with horses, and have an expert on to talk about getting out of the classroom environment to do something different. There's a QR code if you want to register for that. We just released our coaching study. If you haven't seen that, wanted to give you access to our coaching study where we've gone back and looked at the last 150 or so people we've coached and surveyed them about what is the value of coaching. And it's a great way if you're looking to get your organization to invest in coaching to show the why behind it. And then we have a whole bunch of other tools and resources. So for those of you that don't know, we have a lot of free ebooks and our course catalog and other things on our website as well there. So wanted to make sure you saw that. Thanks again, you guys. I appreciate this. Happy New Year. I think maybe this is the last time I can say that for the year. We're already moving into the middle of January. But I appreciate your time and attention, everybody that joined us. And Brian, Deneen, Anika, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.